Hi, welcome to this episode of The Daily. Well, last week we had this incident that has now become world infamous, where a protester at Waitangi threw a sex toy at a Minister of the Crown, one of our MPs, Stephen Joyce, and it was a form of protest about the TPPA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and as the device was thrown, she yelled out, "That's for raping our sovereignty," or something along those lines. So it's a protest about the TPPA. But here's the point. I think that this act has done more harm than good. First of all, I read an article in the paper with the protester a couple of days ago, and in that article she was saying that if it wasn't for her actions, we wouldn't be having this important conversation now. I completely disagree with that, and I mean, clearly that's not accurate, because we were having the conversation for several weeks before this incident even happened. So there actually was, and there was a lot of media coverage, there was a lot of heat going on about the TPPA, there were protest marches and everything. So this conversation was actually happening and taking place. So you can't claim that this event was required to spark a national debate when that debate was already happening. But I think more importantly, effectively what this incident did was it actually did a lot more harm and a lot more credibility damage than it did anything else. It simply generated a media circus. The media loved it because it was just a ridiculously freakish and out there thing to do, and they focused on that. They weren't interested in the message, they were focused on the actual act of throwing a sex toy in someone's face. That's what they obsessed over, and that's what the story became, and that's why it travelled around the world. There's no real interest in the message, it didn't generate anything new, it didn't raise awareness, it just created a media circus. And I would argue that's not necessarily a good thing, it was not a good thing at all if your message is being lost in that. Here's the thing, last week when John Key announced that he was not going to be attending Waitangi, I think a lot of other Kiwis probably felt the same. I thought that he'd made a mistake. I think the prime ministerly thing to do in those situations is to actually turn up, to show some dignity, have dignity in the office and say, you know what, you're making a powerful statement by turning up by saying, look, I am still your Prime Minister, I still care about you, I think this issue matters, Waitangi matters, this day matters, and so I'm going to turn up and be here anyway, regardless. And I think it shows a lot of dignity and it shows a lot of courage, and I think people in the long run are going to be far more respecting of you and the office you hold when you do those kind of things. So I don't think it was right for him just to abandon Waitangi altogether and go to the rugby league instead. I don't think that sent the right message at all. However, then this particular protest event took place where a Minister of the Crown turns up and he has a sex toy thrown in his face, and it's just this ugly, freakish sort of incident. And guess what happens? They take an opinion poll in one of the newspapers and they ask people after this event has happened, do you think that John Key now made the right decision to stay away from Waitangi? When I saw that poll, almost 12,000 people had participated in that poll. And guess what? 75% of them said that they thought he made the right decision to stay away. Another 10% said they didn't care, which means that only 15% of people thought that he should still actually go to Waitangi. Now, I guarantee you, if that particular protest event hadn't have happened, so this protester hadn't thrown the sex toy in the face of the minister, then guess what? I think the split would have been closer to 50-50 or maybe, 60-40. It would have been a lot closer, the split, between those who thought that the Prime Minister should be attending and those who didn't think that he should go at all. I think it also creates a problem going forward now, because what's going to happen next year? Is the Prime Minister going to refer back to this incident, or a future Prime Minister is going to refer back to this incident and say, well, look, it's not a safe place to be, you can't go there, there's no real dialogue, people just insult you and throw things at you, because technically this is an act of assault, by the way, which is another one of the ironies, because remember, the whole protest was about how basically the government was acting to try and take away our freedoms and to rob us of our sovereignty and to impose its will in a very totalitarian way upon us with the TPPA. But interestingly, this protester, who has committed what is technically an assault by throwing something deliberately at someone's face, was let off without any charges whatsoever. They didn't charge her, they just said, okay, it's a protest, and they just let her walk away. They obviously didn't think it was that serious what she'd done. So clearly that sort of tends to say, you know what, maybe this narrative that the government's a big nasty beast that wants to rob away our freedoms and impose itself on us isn't quite as accurate as some are portraying in this particular situation. And I think the other way that it's detrimental going forward, as I said, is it gives future leaders an excuse not to turn up to Waitangi, and it also paints the wrong impression of Waitangi. Waitangi is about celebration. A lot happens at Waitangi. A lot of very good and important things happen there, and it is a very important place for our leaders to be on this particular day. But guess what? this particular incident shifts all of that focus away from the positive stuff and the important stuff that's happening and focuses it in on this one puerile act. And I guarantee you there were a lot of other people who were at Waitangi who would not have agreed with what happened there and would not have looked at that incident and gone, oh, this is great. They might have agreed with the message, but I guarantee a lot of them will think that it was really detrimental and that it wasn't a good way or a productive or fruitful way to actually try and get dialogue happening on these issues. Again, I guess the incident is a powerful reminder. It's not just what you say, it's actually how you speak to people that really matters. So even if you've got something controversial or bold or forthright to say, if you can say that in dialogue with people and engage with them as real people and not just throw things in their face, then guess what? I think you're going to be far more productive and you're going to have a far more fruitful time of trying to see change or bring about a positive result than if you just engage in mindless acts of protest that are all about drawing a circus or just media hype to what you're doing. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily.